From Hanoi, the Prime Minister will go to the G7 meeting in France. Australia's not a member of the G7, but we've been invited by Emmanuel Macron as an observer, essentially, to this particular summit. It's going to be a fascinating meeting of the G7 leaders that Scott Morrison will get to witness and have discussions on the sidelines, because you've got this escalating trade war between the US and China. You've got, of course, what Annalise touched on there, the announcement from the Prime Minister yesterday here in Canberra about Australia joining the US and Britain at this stage, it's the three countries, in patrolling the Strait of Hormuz to protect commercial shipping through there. Well, Tom Connell has the lucky task of being in France covering this meeting and Scott Morrison's visit there, and joins me now. Look, a lot of issues in the mix there, and boy, it looks like a lovely setting, Tom, for a summit. I'm not sure how much of the town you'll get to see, but this is going to be a chance for Scott Morrison to not only rub shoulders but have direct talks with some of those leaders, and perhaps add his encouragement for some of the European leaders to join this freedom of navigation mission in the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, that's true, and if you can think of two nations straight away that would be under some pressure to do so, Germany and France are both here. So given Scott Morrison has made that commitment just before he came here, I'm sure there was some strategy to all of that. It certainly means that his first handshake with Donald Trump is going to be a warm one, but also puts some pressure on those countries. Donald Trump is, as usual, setting somewhat of his own agenda at this G7. He, of course, got elected, David, pledging to make America great again. Now he wants to make the G7 the G8 again. He's put on topic again, inviting Russia back into the fold. It's not the first time he's done that. What's interesting this time is there are reports, this is briefings out from within Paris, that there could be some sympathy this time around from Emmanuel Macron, that he does agree that this could be a good move. The question is, what would change? Because Russia was kicked out of the G8 as it was back then in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea. So would some sort of resolution be needed there? Would there be a concession needed from Russia to actually trigger support in a majority sense from the G7 nations to get them back in? That's the hanging question, but Donald Trump made it clear it's going to be one of the talking points when he spoke ahead of this summit.
We spend a lot of time talking about Russia at those meetings, and they're not there. I think it would be a good thing if Russia were there, so we can speak directly, not have to speak all the, by telephone and other things. So here's the thing. It's a vote of what's now the G7. They were taken out because Putin outsmarted on Crimea, on the Red Line, on other things. Totally outsmarted Obama. Obama was upset. They took him out. I think Russia should be a part of it, because we're looking for world peace and other things.
Tom, President Trump, who we saw there, usually steals the show at any international gathering, any sort of summit like this. But there'll also be a whole lot of focus on the other new guy in town, and that is Boris Johnson, how he and Trump go together, what they do together, and I guess indeed how Scott Morrison, he'll take the opportunity to meet Boris Johnson, I'm sure. But as I mentioned, the three of those leaders, the only ones committed so far to this patrol in the Strait of Hormuz. What's everyone anticipating from Boris Johnson there?
His big task is still Brexit. He's just had meetings with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Interestingly, out of that, for the first time for a while, out of Germany, we heard talk of still negotiation over exactly how that would happen. When a deal was struck under Theresa May that the EU agreed with, of course, then the British Parliament couldn't agree on that. So is there a little wedge of light perhaps for Boris Johnson to get that previous deal changed in some way and make it in some way acceptable, of course, and we get into the Irish backstop and all the complexity that the saga of Brexit has been. So that will be the thing on his plate here. This is an economic summit, of course, so that is a fair game to be up for discussion. But there are so many things right now. You've got flashing red lights in the economies of the UK, Germany as well, the US stock market and what's happening there, and, of course, the US-China trade war. So Donald Trump has again been saying to people, hey, we're winning. Look at China's economy. They're hurting. We're not. He's going to hear here some sympathy about his approach to things such as intellectual property theft, currency manipulation as well, but he'll hear pushback saying that this is a good thing overall, that the fact that the global markets are struggling at the moment, we've had those precipitous falls of late, and also other general warning signs in economies, that this is not good overall, not a good thing, so that it can't be seen as all positive at the moment. So look, as you say, that the focus will be on Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. How close will their friendship be? Will they strike up a rapport? Reports already of 5 to 6 phone calls between the two leaders, David, so I'm sure they'll have plenty in common. And Scott Morrison, he's got a slightly strange position as this country invited along. He'll be participating in a couple of the sessions here, one of those focusing on biodiversity in oceans. So, his talk of getting plastics out of the oceans is something he'll be focusing on there. And remember this other thing he's pushing the G20, extremism online, terror content online. There'll be a session focusing on that. Look, that's low-hanging fruit really for Scott Morrison. No one's going to disagree with those two elements. The Iran situation and his position there will be getting a bit more interest though.